We're looking today at avant-garde movements in photography in the early 20th century, specifically Dada and Surrealism. First, to clarify some terms, when we're talking about avant-garde in art history, we're talking about radical cultural or political ideas expressed through formal innovation, meaning a look that challenges you because it aims to change the world. So avant-garde movements in art are characterized by visual styles that are aggressively different from what people had seen before, because they believe that through these formal innovations, they're going to change people's minds and hopefully change the world. They tend to have manifestos. Avant-garde movements in photography include Dada and Surrealism, which we'll be looking at here, and the New Vision photography of the Bauhaus, which we'll be looking at in just a little bit. Now, first, about Dada as a movement. The first thing to know about Dada as a movement is that it absolutely must be seen in the context of World War I. So this is a movement that arises contemporaneously with World War I, grows in impact and emotional fervor during the war, and by the time the war is over, the impact of the war on Europe in this generation cannot be overstated. It completely devastated the region and the generation that was coming up at that time. The way that people were feeling in art at this time, they're feeling like nothing around them made sense anymore. The old ideals that they had been raised on and their hopes for technology, they didn't make sense, and why then should they hold on to old values in art? So the art that you see rising in Dada is chaotic and discordant. A lot of it features technology and monstrosity. It really brings to life the sense that technology had brought out the worst in humanity. In Dada, you see many mediums and you see many nationalities, which was a truly international movement. These images give you a little bit of a sense of what Dada theatrical performances were like. Live action performance events featured prominently in Dada life and culture, and the things that they made costumes out of were, I mean, they're barely clothing. They're more like sculpture that you can sort of fit a body into. And the scripts that they would perform would sometimes just be transcriptions of sounds, and then they would sort of like vocalize these sounds. So they were absolutely chaotic. Dada also featured publications, and the publications of poetry that they wrote in Dada. Again, to call it poetry, you got to kind of expand your sense of what poetry can mean to be able to see what the Dada artists were doing in poetry. They're combining words from multiple different languages with typological or typographical ornaments that aren't even intended to be letters, okay? And they're putting them together in these very wild and creative patterns that are really interesting and fascinating to look at on the page. But then they would perform these poems. They would do these sort of poetry readings where they would sort of vocalize all of these different sounds. So that sense of two-dimensional layout of things that become a live action performance, that's all integrated in the feeling of Dada poetry, writing, and graphic design. So one of the artists of Dada who you are probably familiar with just through popular culture is Marcel Duchamp, and this is a piece that often is pointed at to show just how crazy this Dada art movement really was. But again, it's got to be taken in context. So this is Duchamp's LHOOQ. Okay, so this is a postcard. I mean, it's a literal postcard that he bought in a postcard shop. He drew a mustache and goatee on it, writes the letters LHOOQ on the bottom, which apparently if you're fluent in French and pronounce those letters in the right way, it sounds like you're saying something really crass. So it's like he's making bathroom graffiti on the Mona Lisa. This is exhibited in a Dada group show. So to see how this makes sense in the context of Dada, you got to think a little bit about what the Dada artists were doing. First of all, remember it's a time of total chaos, and the Dada artists are deciding to just like play up this chaos to the hilt. In a way, Dada is a little bit like a primal scream of people who have sort of endured the chaos of the war. So the sense of being offensive, in your face, and kind of a smack in the face of all tradition and culture and refinement and everything that had been taken seriously before. That's what's going on in Duchamp's action here. He's being crass, he's being rude, and he's being childish, and it's all part of the sort of performative aspect of being a Dada artist. And it's worth noting that Marcel Duchamp was already known as a painter by this time. So the nude descending a staircase that you see on the screen here, this is the kind of painting that he was doing right before Dada comes about. So he was interested in technology and how technology was leading us to see the world in new and different ways. So he was already established as an artist and a challenging thinker before these Dada gestures come around. Another element of context that helps make sense of LHOQ is what had happened to the Mona Lisa by that time. So in 1911, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre by somebody who just walked up and pulled it off of the wall, stuck it in his coat, and walked back out again. And for over 2 years, the painting was missing. During that time, artists were constantly being interviewed by the police and interrogated because they believed that an artist must have had something to do with this. So this turned this icon of the Renaissance and and sort of apex of human civilization into this sort of scandal, a sort of center point of this international scandal. And people were looking at art differently than they had before. So that's all background for what Duchamp does when he takes this postcard of the Mona Lisa and just like it does something really casual and flippant and crass with it. He's showing how the context and the world that's changing around these people is changing how they see what had come before and what it means to them. Here's Raoul Hausmann's The Spirit of Our Time. So on the left, you see a sculpture. It is an assemblage. It's got pieces of things all put together as a sculpture, a lot of found objects. This reflects what the Dada artists are doing with their sort of collecting together of scraps and bits and pieces from their world and just sort of mashing them together in this sort of chaotic blender that sort of brings to art what they feel like is going on around them in the world. And Hannah Hoch's Cut with the Kitchen Knife, the full title translates to English as Cut with the Kitchen Knife, Dada through the Last Weimar Beer Belly Cultural Epoch of Germany, typically just called Cut with the Kitchen Knife. This is basically a political cartoon. Okay, this is a photo montage. It's made from clippings from newspapers and magazines at the time. But all of the people that are in this poster-size photo montage, they are people from real public life in Germany. They are politicians, they are artists, they are writers, they are rebels and prisoners, and there are crowd scenes all mashed together with parts of animal bodies and grown-up adult heads put onto baby bodies, and there's an insect emerging out of somebody's forehead, and the Dadaisten in one corner, the Dadaists, and the anti-Dada in another corner. It's this big battle between the Dadaists and the anti-Dadaists. So this is photo montage, and again, it's blending together technology and humanity, animal, human, and feels like total madness, but it makes sense in its original context. If you get up close to it, all the way in the center, you can see a sort of modern dancer who's sort of tossing her head up into the air, and it looks like there's an arrow piercing her head. That is the face is a photograph of Käthe Kollwitz, who was a very deeply respected anti-war artist from the previous generation. And sort of pasted into the bottom right corner is a map of Europe highlighting the countries where women had the right to vote. So that shows some of the relevance of things that are going on in this artwork. On the right hand side, you see Hannah Hoch with her man Raoul Hausmann together at the exhibition where this photo montage was shown. Haruho continued to make these challenging photo montages through the rest of her career that really took images of beautiful women from the world around them and reassembled them together to really put into question how we define beauty and how we define humanity. Okay, a recap of terminology. Cutting and pasting in many different formats were super important for the Dada artists. When we're talking about collage, we're talking about something that's assembled from pieces cut out from various two-dimensional sources. And collage was a technique that had been practiced for a long time before we got to the 20th century, but was a lot more popular in the 20th century because there was so much printed matter around people all the time, so they were building from it. There's also assemblage, which is basically collage in 3 dimensions. So this is making sculptures from pieces that come from various original sources. Saruel Hausmann is a person who made assemblages. Building on those, photomontage is a sort of a subset of collage. So photomontage is creating a finished image from multiple photographic sources. They're often rephotographing it to create a finished image. Not always, but often. The result does not aim for spatiotemporal unity, and what that means is that it looks pieced together. So photomontage is to be distinguished from composite photography. And we had seen composite photography in the 19th century. Composite photography aims for an effect of spatiotemporal unity, meaning that it looks like a single finished photograph. But photomontage does not aim for that.